Happy Sunday, and welcome back to Retake the Week. It's been a little quiet. I think we got the first little murmurings of Counter-Strike returning. We've had a few little cups. We're going to be discussing one of the ones that concluded, just because it's something to talk about. We saw the debut of a couple of the newer rosters, at least in the Tier 2 space. But before we get into all the topics, all the details, and all the new little transfer rumours we didn't cover on last week's episode, members get access to special privileges. Of course, they get access to the Retake the Week behind-the-scenes content, today featuring some intimate details of Quacke's holiday across Sweden, which was something of a disaster. You also get access to interviews that I'll be doing with players, coaches, members of the scene that are important and interesting to me, and also the occasional special prospects video, or demo video, as it probably should be referred to, because sometimes I just feel like cracking open some demos and talking about them with you. So that's what members get for now, in terms of content, but also they get the special privilege of asking us a question in our monthly Q&A, which we very much enjoy. So plenty more of those, please. And yeah, let's get into the first topic, which is not actually what's listed on the show. It's instead, Quacke, how are you doing? You were away for a little while there. Feel refreshed?
I do. Honestly, we did a lot of walking and biking, so I do feel fine. But I'm very sunburned. Parts of my body are in quite a bit of pain because of that. My back hurts a bit. I could really use a long cold shower. But I'm good. Today's a football. Still got a lot of stuff done this week in esports. I actually managed to keep Dust to Sweden mostly running from a tent for a week, which was cool. And we've managed to cook quite a bit of stuff with Elite Clan, which you might have seen on. Well, Elite Clan you probably have seen on Twitter since we put that out last week.
Yeah, the
Actually,
announcement. I'm
after we
sure
recorded
everyone's
our episode.
noticed.
Yeah, we got quite a bit of reach. I think we beat Johnny Speeds in follower count straight away, and we didn't even have a team at that point. So it was yeah, like we're doing fine. We got a lot of views on that announcement as well.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff, good stuff is coming, and it's going to be cooking in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, my job there is podcast production, and you're going to see something of that sort in the next couple of weeks, which is going to be it's going to be awesome. I'm so hyped about it.
Yeah, I mean, I know some of these details. You've let me know, a few of the little cheeky spoilers, the niblets, the little details, and it's going to be a really interesting time. I know there's also another friend of ours, Tony, very talented fella, who's going to be involved in the project. That's been announced as well. So I'm really excited to see what happens. With that in mind, let's dive into our first topic. On the topic of podcasts, HooXi did a Danish language podcast, and now I'm going purely off the Reddit post, summarizing it. So if any of this is inaccurate, blame the Reddit post, because I don't speak Danish as much as I'd never want to. I simply have never learnt it, so I can't understand what the hell he said. But the topics discussed seem to be revealing, let's put it that way. There's certain things I'm not sure we'd ever get to hear otherwise, especially based on like the JKS decisions, because that stuff just at the time felt a bit off, but with these revelations coming to light, really makes it seem like they were forced into a move they didn't like and just kind of had to make it happen. So the summary says that it was a mistake to bench JKS, and it was due to the Nico leaving to Falcons talks that was happening that they actually ended up looking at making moves trying to replace Nico's impact. And that would have meant essentially rebuilding their rifle core. So dropping JKS was a part of that. But when he doesn't end up going away, they kind of left in an awkward situation where they have to bring in someone at the last second, bring in Nexa because I'm sure it's just a familiarity thing. They don't have to put in that much work to get used to playing with him. And we end up in that really weird situation. So that sort of insight is really interesting to someone like me, because there's no way you make that decision purely on vibes, purely on chattiness. It all seemed petty and dumb at the time, the reasons they gave publicly. This makes a lot more sense. I'm not sure if it makes the most sense to you, Quack, but for me, it's just, yeah, there's no way friendship was that important.
I mean, okay, so the post is up on the Global Offensive subreddit. It should still be one of the upper ones, so you can just go there to find it.
Yeah, I mean, it was hottest for me when I opened Reddit. Like,
yeah, a lot of what he's saying is either very predictable, or something we already knew, like how much he was helping out from home during the Dallas win. But
yeah, that too.
one of the interesting details is talking about the JKS benching, which is something we haven't really heard from before. I think what they're doing is, so basically what he said is that Nico was in talks with Falcons, and the G2 camp were pretty damn sure he was going to go. And at that point, they felt like, well, maybe we can't just replace Nico 1-for-1. We probably need to make 2 moves happen to make that happen. And in that sense, I think it makes sense to bench JKS as well, because if you're planning on making 2 moves, you're losing your big star player. Then you have to bench someone, either Hunter or JKS. And out of that one, at that time, I probably would have picked. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Hunter in the first place, but I think I would have picked JKS and tried to rebalance things a bit more. Maybe tried to move Hunter forward in some sense into better positions, or moving backwards and try to put someone else, like put him in JKS's spots and try to get someone else to, as the JKS replacement, so to speak, to play the Nico roles. But yeah, in the end, Nico stayed, and that was a problem because they'd already made the decision to bench JKS. And as he says, it was a mistake, and they rushed things quite a bit. So in the end, they just needed someone to replace JKS. There were no options, and they decided to go for Nexa. So I think we've all talked about the Nexa move as just sort of a nepotism move, where like, oh, they just wanted their friend to get into the team, and that's, I mean, they probably picked Nexa because they were familiar with him, but this paints quite a different picture, where they say that it was basically just a mistake from benching JKS, and there were not a lot of better options. And honestly, at that time, I can't think of any much better options to put in that spot. I mean, the recruitment that was happening at the same time, what was this, like late 2023? I'm gonna say like October. Probably they were thinking about this. I think maybe the best option you could have even hoped to swing was Diha, because he had an endless contract that was ending. But I think even then he wanted to stay at that point. And even then, a lot was still uncertain about Senpai's and stuff. So he probably, at that point, he was probably keen on staying with Ens. You really didn't have much options there at that point, I don't think. So
Well, I think
yeah,
in terms of like an expiring contract like Diaz, you're always going to be able to offer more than Ents if you're G2. So there definitely are moves they could have gone for. Like there's things they could have tried, but it was the way it's characterized to me just really feels like it's a last second thing, and so you just have to go with a guy who you know. Like it's not a real choice by anything. It's like not even really like a choice that they want to make as like he's our friend, he's our guy. Like no. We need a player. We need someone we can play with pretty much immediately. Nexa. The guy most of us.
Yeah, Nexa is the guy. He is that guy, but it does paint a different picture than what people assumed. I assumed out of that move. I don't think you had many better options. I'm just looking at the ranking right now to see if there is anyone you could have swung. I think Diho at that point would have wanted to stay with Ens, because at that point, Sunpayas and Madden going with Snappy to Falcons wasn't done. It was actually just Snappy leaving at that point, and Glaive joining us the IGL. Nerds
I still
as well.
think I still think it's a play you can swing, because my word, like Ents are not a big budget org. You throw in an extra like
no, but I mean, Ens were going strong. Ens were going strong with Nerds and Sunpayas and Madden, and you know, you've just made the IGL swap. You're like, okay, we can make this work. And then Senpais and Madden kind of jump ship kind of late, and Nerds also leaves. At that point, maybe you could have done it, but Nexa was already on the team by then. So, I'm just not sure. I think SDY probably would have been a better option. Because he was kicking it on Monty at that point. That's probably the only better option I can think of, just off the top of my head. Everybody else, because it was also a time when a lot of people were locked into with the major and everything. Because the roster luck was coming up, you had to make moves pretty quickly as well. Like I think this was in mid-November, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it would have been mid-November. So, I mean, Frozen going to FaZe was pretty much done. Isak, we actually know from Gamer Legion now that Isak couldn't leave. Ash talked about it in his interview. He was sort of on the edge of leaving, but he would have gone to NIP in that case, and they convinced him to stay to keep the RMR spot. So yeah, it's just at this point, yeah, it kind of makes sense. Like now the timeline makes sense now that HooXi has talked about this a bit more. But as he says, it was also a mistake. It was a big mistake, and that's. I guess it's just a sense of panic when it's like someone like Nico is maybe leaving your team, and of course, like it's understandable that a management would rush things at that point, but it's also a huge mistake and paints a very bad light for the G2 management again. So yeah.
No,
Yeah.
we definitely have critiques to make towards them. Like,
Oh yeah.
we've had a lot to say. But on the other stuff he's discussed, I do find it funny that it comes up that he thinks Snacks is a big mistake as a signing. There's no elaboration in this summary, so I'm not sure if he does go into more detail in like the actual podcast itself. Oh, it's on Apple Podcasts as well. God damn, ew. So maybe he has more reasons to why. Like maybe he does have something to say about Snacks' calling or about Snacks' fit. But for now, all we know is that he thinks it's a big mistake. He has good things to say about Nico, which is always nice. I think, especially as a player who has been in the past considered essentially one of Counter-Strike's problem children. Like, despite his talent, he has had issues working in teams. If HooXi has that much positive to say about him, he probably has learned and matured a certain amount. And I said this before, actually, when we discussed him not taking the IGL mantle. But yeah, the first step in the maturity, like cycle, like arc, is not being the diva, not demanding everything, not expecting everything of everyone else to be perfect and being an asshole. But then the next part, after taking yourself out of the spotlight, is in the right conversation, the right context, putting yourself back into it to assume the responsibility that needs to be taken. And so we're still not reached that point, I think, with Nico, because eventually to make this roster work, I think, to be truly elite, it might just have to be him calling. With the personalities on the roster and the way they've played in the past, in successes, the way they've played, I think it probably is the best fit. But no, that's interesting to follow. But the other part that's really we could talk about is that when he joins G2, HooXi, he's actually turning down offers from Gamer Legion and Evil Geniuses. Those are the other teams interested in him at the time. Which I find fascinating because those other two moves, like Game Legion feels like technically a step up from Copenhagen Flames, but not a big one, not a risk for him, and not a team that I think he needs to particularly go and play on at that point. But the Evil Geniuses one is just wild. It's like they threw a bunch of money at him, apparently, more than G2, but he rejected it. So I think good on you, HooXi. Like, you were given, essentially offered a poison chalice, diamond crusted poison chalice, and were able to turn it down. And sure, you ended up in a pretty rough situation at G2, like taking a lot of shit from fans, analysts. Not a great scenario either, but at least you didn't end up on the depression roller coaster that was Evil Geniuses at this time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he made the right move. If I remember correctly, G2 didn't have a ton of IGL options. I mean, people were talking about maybe Tabson, but then he extended with Big, and it was just not an option anymore. So the Gamer Legion one is interesting. It's one which actually does so much for the timeline if that happens instead of G2. Because G2 at that point are probably... I mean, look, would you really pick Gamer Legion over G2? I don't know. Probably not. But
It'd be
that
rough.
also leaves
It'd be
G2.
difficult
It leaves
decision
G2
to
in a...
make.
Yeah. It leaves G2 in a really tough spot in terms of getting an in-game leader. But it also means Sui doesn't join Gamer Legion, and that makes the Rio major and the Paris major quite a bit different with what that roster eventually ended up doing with Emma, Acor, Kios, and Isak, and HooXi. I don't know if it gets better or worse, honestly. I think at that point, it becomes sort of a thing. If I'm putting those players into HooXi's system, I could see that doing quite well for some periods of time. But I also think that HooXi's shortcomings would be more highlighted, which might like worsen their results. But anyway, having an offer from EG, I don't think is too unexpected because Vorborg was just coming in there, and it's not a surprise that he wanted to bring HooXi with him from Copenhagen Flames. So that is a reasonable move in my opinion. In the end, they ended up with Nealon as the caller because this was in the middle of the rebuild where they cut. Let me see exactly who they cut so I don't speak out of my ass. They cut Stewie and Rush, kept Cirque, Breezy, and Automatic, and they brought in Hext, Vorborg, and Nealon. Oh yeah, they also got rid of Malik around this time. So I mean, yeah, that was at one point where people sort of thought that, all right, EG are done for. We know they offered quite a bit more money. I do wonder why a lot of players didn't end up going there in the end, because we also know they were interested in a lot of pretty good, damn good players, especially about half a year later when they tried to rebuild again. Around that time, there was a lot of talk about Electronic being close and such, but yeah, he made the right move picking G2. I think, as he said in the post, his stint with G2, he rates it a 6 out of 10. I think that's a pretty fair rating. I think he left G2. He says he thinks he left G2 in a better state than he arrived, and I think if he had left a bit earlier, that would have been true. I'm not sure how I feel about it right now, but yeah.
Well, I think if you ignore the addition of Snacks, like he can't do anything about that. But at his very last, like the last frame of his existence on G2, if you compare that to when he joins, they've added 2 huge trophies, 1 very big trophy. Not too much success at majors, but at least there's some silverware in the cabinet, and they're not just make the final, we're talented, but we never win anything team.
Yeah.
And so I think I think he can say they were better under his tenure than they were under Alexi B, than they were probably under Nexa, despite Nexa also making a major final and being like a pixel away from winning Nuke. So I don't know. I think it's fair to rate himself 6 out of 10. I was expecting it, honestly, if he could given himself a 7, I still wouldn't hate it. I'd still be like, you know what? Yeah. If I'm the IGL of a big team, I do manage to bring in trophies, I'd be pretty happy. And I'm not even counting his Dallas win, because that's technically his roster that he's essentially coaching at this point. But I'm not going to count it because he didn't play. But the one thing I am missing from all of this that I would love to have had him respond to or talk about, maybe he didn't want to because he thought it wouldn't be appropriate, but to talk about the coaches. I mean, I especially want to hear about his thoughts on Taz, but also just in his entire tenure, the coaches he worked with, what he thought they brought to the team, what he thought they did well, and especially in the Taz context, what the hell he thought his coach did. Because as external observers, we are struggling with the whole Taz as a coach thing. I know like Maui was on timeout watch when he was following them during a watch party. Basically, it was like clockwork. G2 were winning, Taz would take a pointless timeout and they'd start losing. It was frustrating, to say the least. So I'd have loved to hear about that. But overall, I think it's if you understand Danish, I'd go listen to it. Because not only does it seem insightful, but the little details, like the line we laughed about, the final line of the entire post about his friends showing off his Instagram, but him still not getting any ladies. It's just funny, and it just seems like this was a pretty fun podcast to listen to. But no, I do think there's a lot of interesting things in here, so go check that out. Now that we've successfully talked about a podcast we didn't listen to for 15 minutes, let's move on to some more actual news. TSM wins Summer SkinClub Cup. Now, it's not a huge deal, this cup. I'm going to preface this as unenthusiastically as possible. There's not that many big teams, big names, but it's definitely a positive sign for TSM. Now, they re-entered the scene, under the guise of wanting to be a smart team who build the right way, do their scouting. And what they ended up doing was just completely fuck it up for about what, a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Something
It
like
was
that.
awful. And they went through various iterations of the roster, always built around Valde and always international up until this latest version. They've now gone full Danish, and immediately both Valde and Zyphon are just far more comfortable within the roster. I think Zyphon on the international version of the team was a non-factor, and whilst he wasn't the MVP of this run, he was far more active, far more present. And then players like Altex were able to slot right in, get to fragging. Acor and Nico didn't have to do a whole lot, but it's all you need really when everything else is firing, everything else is working. Just show up and don't shit the bed, and that's kind of what they did. So TSM win this event. They beat not the greatest names in the world, you know, Passion UA, Johnny Speeds, and Sashi. Sashi will be playing Esports World Cup. They're decent enough tier 2 team. Johnny Speeds and Passion UA, pretty similar, like in terms of their talent at least, and how they've looked in tier 2. So I guess if you're trying to establish the foundation for your team, beating these sorts of rosters on your debut, really positive. So I think TSM I'm not going to say they've nailed it, because I still have question marks.
Too early.
And they still are supposed to be a team that, considering their org, like the name brand and all that, they should be aiming for a real tier 1 lineup. So we'll see how they continue to move forward. Maybe they do make more changes in the end and they become a slow grind up. But for now, all I can say is it's a good start.
Yeah, this is the best result they've had since they came back. The only thing that compares is the third place at European Pro League, which is similar size, prize pool, similar level of competition, and they only managed about third place. It is a good result. It's a good result, and it's a good lineup. I think they've sort of... I wonder what it says about Xtas building this original lineup, which then is completely impossible to manage for the org. Like, because the way that team was talked about was like, oh, this is the baby team of Xtas. He's built this from the ground up with exactly the players he wants, and now, you know, this is gonna work perfectly. And TSM assigned them, and then they did fuck all. And it's like, maybe Xtas just doesn't know a damn fucking thing about Counter-Strike. I don't know.
I
but
highly doubt this is the team Xtas dreamed of when he built it, though. Like, let's be real.
I'm
He's given
guessing
the
he had
keys
some
to the
candidates
vault,
he
but
didn't
the
get.
vault is pretty small. Like, as the quote goes, maybe next time don't get a safe that could be carried out by a smallish man. Like, that's the sort of like financial backing he had for this TSM roster. It wasn't a crazy like super team project. But no, I agree that there are question marks around how he built the team, and also from what we have had leaked by players, what the hell kind of structure he was trying to implement. Like, I know he built the roster, then essentially immediately left, which was just weird. But yeah, the absolute clusterfuck that it was doesn't paint him in a very flattering light.
He had clashes with the org. I remember he left the project and then actually didn't leave the project around like a thing where he asked for a boot camp and they were like, actually, no, you cannot have a boot camp. And he was like, what the fuck? I need a boot camp to make this team work. And they was like, no, we can't do it. And then he like left the team, but then he came back or some shit like that. And it was something about getting paid or whatever. But I mean, what he left was a lineup that was really hard to manage, that couldn't really play. And I think they finally found their footing by realizing, honestly, we're not doing anything by signing Quartz or Poison into this lineup. We should just go with, you know, what's more comfortable. And they've gone for a Danish team, which is also, I think we talked about this last week. It is a fairly decent lineup on paper, and they've had good results now. Yeah, there's not too much to complain about. Discuss really. They played 11 great maps. Beat Sashi as well. Sashi being a team that has gone quite strong in the recent couple of weeks and months. And of course, the win over Johnny Speeds as well is pretty big in my opinion. Johnny Speeds being very high on a lot of people's list right now, including Alves.
I mean, they've lost Lecro, but aside from that, yeah, it's still a very dangerous roster.
Somebody, I didn't watch the game, but I saw somebody talk about it where they said Lecro's absence really showed during this game, where Valde just called circles around Johnny Speeds, which is probably true, in all honesty. Draken taking over as IGL is natural from a leadership perspective, but I am not sure about his tactical level. Which is something we're gonna have to see with the Johnny Speeds, basically. But the way it's looking, it doesn't really matter. They're almost in the RMR either way.
Yeah.
Honestly, side tangent on Johnny Speeds right now. I have looked at the rankings. I think they if they just keep playing these cups, they should be in the RMR. Like the only way they aren't is if Sashi have a really good result in the Esports World Cup. Because I think Johnny Speeds are about to pass at the very least Aurora and Fnatic, and that would put them 16th. Because Fnatic are playing fuck all until EPL, as far as I know, and
Oh, you mean straight the
Aurora as
RMR
well.
direct, not the qualifier?
Yeah, the RMR. They're 2 spots away from the
Jesus.
RMR.
I had no idea they were that close to
And
it.
there's definitely teams in here who are not really playing much. Like Betboom as well are probably just going to play online cups. And Johnny Speed is going to be winning lower tier online cups, which is going to give them big ranking points through prize money. There are teams here that they should definitely pass, because there's a lot of teams here that are either skipping or missed out on Esports World Cup, and obviously the next event is an invite-only event with partnerships. So teams like Betboom, Fnatic, Aurora won't be there, and they're just narrowly ahead of Johnny Speed. So I think I'm going to make a bold prediction here and say that Johnny Speeds end up with an RMR invite in less than a month, which is fucking insane, and they need that. Like at that point, they will get an org. They will get an organization at that point. I know they've been in talks with a lot of different orgs, but it just hasn't really come together. But at that point, they will have an org for sure. There's no fucking way they get an RMR invite and stay orgless until November. Like, there's no fucking way. So
Yeah, that'd be silly.
but that was a side tangent. Talking about TSM, everybody's playing well by the looks of things. Their signings look good. I think hard to judge Nico on a stats sheet, but like I said, I wasn't able to watch these games. But it's a very
He
good
was
result.
very much in the position of just don't fuck it up. Like when,
Yeah.
because Altex, Zyphon were the ones finding the real impact. Valde as well. Him and Acor, just don't fuck it up. And that was essentially the way I saw it, and they didn't. So I think that's nice. It's a nice little.
What is okay? So there's no core in this team which has played together before, but I know there have been some of these players probably have played together before.
Were Altex and Zyphon in the academies together? I don't think so. I don't remember it. I think Zyphon was in there
let me
before
see.
him.
So obviously Valde and Zyphon have played together. Yeah, Astralis Talent briefly played with Altex and Nico, because they put Nico in as a stand-in for some event. OG, of course, Valde and Nico played together, which is probably one of the reasons why Nico's here.
Yeah, I mean, Altex replaced Zyphon in the academy, so they didn't actually overlap.
They played it like 2 games together before Zyphon was out, but yeah, maybe Zyphon was just standing in. Oh, Tricked
Maybe,
as well.
actually.
I'm Tricked.
But no, this is basically the way I want to describe this when I talk about this. Is basically they are all players from the Danish scene, like who have played with a variety of different Danish, like IGLs, Danish coaches. They've been in various academies and stuff. They're just solid Counter-Strike players. It's basically what I said about Sashi on yesterday's recording of the Double Swing. Watch out Monday night, guys. Members, of course, already have access. They aren't like crazy talents, like necessarily, or like the best players in the world. Altex, I think, has some more to show us, and I think so does Zyphon. But they're not that crazy a team. It's just they play solid, proper Counter-Strike. And they believe in the system and they actually execute it. So I think they're just a solid enough roster that you don't hate to watch.
Looking at the alternative, which would have been Blame F instead of Nico, now that I'm looking at the team history, Valde and Nico have obviously played together for years on North and Heroic. And eventually OG and whatever. Looking back at that, with the alternative being Blame F, for that spot, that is changing up the team dynamic quite a bit and also brings in a different sort of viewpoint. I know Blame F said he didn't want to be IGL, but like it's still going to be like different visions.
Yeah, he's still going to have his mouth open, isn't he? Like he's not just going to sit there quietly in silence like, this is fine. Sorry.
Yeah, and that has the risk to really destabilize
This
the
is
team. So
fine. Sorry, I was just trying to make myself bigger on camera because he's huge.
you could make the case that the Nico hire was the better hire in the first place, considering that team history, because you know what you're getting. Valle knows what he's getting. He knows that's going to be comfortable. So yeah, um, good job. It's a comfortable team. Finally, TSM is someone we can kind of count on, which I think they look to me. They look like they are going to be the best Danish team after Astralis. I think if I'm going to go out on a limb on paper.
Yeah, you might be right. Shit. I don't hate that
Yeah,
take.
it is. Gaming Gladiators and Sashi. Gaming Gladiators are kind of mid.
So Sashi.
So Sashi, but
So, I
yeah,
mean, it's
Sashi
a
have a couple
battle
of
of
good
mid,
results
but
going.
still, like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about Whopper, man, with Vista, Gnoffer, Leaks, Slime. That's the roster for Denmark.
Yeah, dude. Ecstatic outside shot at the title.
Anyway, there's plenty of tier 2
Yeah.
Danish rosters still lying about. But let's move on to an interesting story that I didn't notice happened until like last night. But it was more from like midweek. So Croatia were playing as a nation in the IESF European qualifiers for essentially another World Cup type event. I mean, I've mostly been following this event from the women's side of it because I think the France FE team is fucking sick and has a chance to actually go all the way in this. I mean, I know Russia's always going to be difficult to beat, and so are Poland, but I think the France roster is really good. So I've been following the women's side. But on the men's side, yeah, Croatia listed in 6th, but disqualification brackets cheating, which I think is a bit alarming. So I didn't really understand what's going on here because I hadn't followed the event too much. I know certain players on the roster, like guys like Mackie. I recognize the name. I didn't remember why. And then also Roga, who's just been... He's been a really good player in Tier 2 on like Balkan teams and things like that. So it's a roster of some interest, some talent, but they get, DSQ'd. And allegedly for cheating during their match against Israel. If you check the next game after that they were officially banned from. They lose by default to Rebels. And it says apparently they were considered to be cheating or as being using auxiliary software to gain an unfair advantage against Israel. So I wanted details. I believe you understood this. It's just when you messaged me about it, I didn't understand a word you were talking about. So can you explain to us what happened or what went down?
Right. First of all, you recognize Maki because he was on that Strive and Chaos mix, which almost knocked Spirit out of the major qualifier ahead of Antwerp, where Spirit ended up finishing top 4, which is one of my favorite factoids about Joel taking a random ass shit Balkan mix into a hair's length, like a hair's width of qualifying for the major, playing Spirit 2-1 overtime in the final map, and very nearly knocking out a semi-finalist team out of that same major qualifier, which is one of my favorite factoids by Joel. Before he was a controversial character, that was like, look at this guy's talent. Now it's more like, maybe he was cheating. But yeah, that's where you recognize Maki from. Roga, we all recognize, of course. So to start the story off, they were disqualified after being found by IESF to have cheated in the Israel game. This was not communicated publicly just yet. It was communicated privately to the participants in the event and to Liquipedia and HLTV, who have updated their pages for this. So far, there's no public statement from IESF. I'm assuming at some point we are going to get something like a ban length or something of the sort, in which case we might know who is suspected of cheating. Looking at these maps, I don't know what kind of cheats it is. I know it wasn't an anti-cheat ban. Mestal said as much. Mestal, one of the Israeli players, who's often very vocal on Twitter, and in this case especially, he was very vocal on Twitter about the suspension. Mostly because they didn't revert the bracket. Israel stayed knocked out, and in terms of time constraints, considering both Croatia and Israel managed to play a game after this, Israel played in the lower bracket and Croatia played in the upper bracket. Considering both of them played a game after this game happened, if they'd caught this earlier, they probably would have just put Israel through instead. But since both of them played a game, it would be quite a big hassle to revert the bracket. You would need to extend this tournament by maybe a day or two to make that happen. one day probably. But yeah, it does fuck a lot of shit up, and I can kind of see why they didn't do it. But it's a shame they didn't catch this earlier. It was after an investigation, basically demo review. They found that someone was cheating.
It's
If
a
we're talking
demo
about radar,
thing.
we don't know what.
It's just a demo, like Overwatch style.
It was a demo review, but
Oh god damn it!
there's layers to this. We don't know what kind of cheats they were talking about. It might straight have been Wallach or aimbot. In which case, I would understand a demo review. You can probably ban off a demo review in that case if it is obvious enough. Um, I haven't watched the game. I haven't watched the demo.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
not sure it
downloading the
was
demo.
streamed anywhere. If there's yeah, yeah. You should watch the demo and see if you could see something. Um, I think if we're talking radar cheats, I'm sort of like, ooh, dangerous territory, IESF. We do not ban radar cheaters off of demo review alone. Which unfortunately means we don't ban radar cheaters. But yeah, it's like we shouldn't do that. It is because when you see a radar cheater, unless they're being extremely stupidly blatant about it, to the point where there is no possible explanation other than having radar cheats. Um, there the thing you see when you see someone using radar cheats is someone playing good Counter Strike, and there
Yeah,
you shouldn't. Especially when we're talking about this, we're talking about national team Counter Strike with government like in some cases government organizations are involved in this. This is pretty serious and could have pretty serious consequences if you ban unfairly. I mean, look, assuming the country in question cares about esports, but it's a big matter of national pride. Like there are big stakes in this. You should only ban when there's no shadow of a doubt that someone is cheating. And in terms of radar cheats, most of the time there is going to be a shadow of doubt. It could just be they're playing good Counter Strike. So at that point, a ban is pretty much impossible. Unfortunately, it is one of the you know game breaking things about radar cheats. Um, but I don't know what kind of cheats we're talking about. Something which made me perk up is that Roga on Mirage went 23-10, or sorry, 32-10 in a 23 run game, which is fucking insane. I think he also has been a decent player in the past, so I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe he
he's
just
a
had a life
talent.
game
I'm gonna
map.
be honest. He's a talent. The fact that he
Yeah, he
doesn't
didn't
play
play. He
map
didn't.
two is weird.
It is weird. The layer which is to this is that this is not the first time the Croatian national team have been banned for cheating in a tournament. And this is like, woo. Because the Croatian national team, weirdly enough, participated in the regional Clash Arena event, which Joel's team ended up winning. Or rather in the close qualifier for that, which was pretty much this exact five. It was, let me see, it was Roga, Maki, RB Furious, and Salted. But they also played with the Chinese player Wang Jie, who is notorious for various reasons, I think, in terms of match fixing or cheating. Um, and they ended up getting banned for cheating, and they have a 6-month suspension for all Fisher events because of that. So, for some reason, they also participate in IESF, and they've been banned for the same reason. Could also be something that maybe influenced the judgment of whoever was reviewing these demos. Could be that like, oh, these guys were banned for cheating in the past. We should be suspicious of them. Um, but yeah, they are out. So are Israel. They didn't get reverted. Their suspension means that Serbia go through on default because they would have played the 5th place decider game for the 5th and final spot for the World Championship. Which means Serbia go through. Um, Yeah, they were pretty. All of the players pretty much were pretty stupid about this on Twitter, where they just instead of being like radio silence or being like you know, defending themselves in a more civilized way, all of them sort of resorted to replying to everybody, accusing them with insults, and they didn't seem to take it very serious. So maybe they just don't fucking care. Oh, some people also said they betted on their own games on Chinese betting sites,
Yeah,
allegedly.
I saw that as well. Reported.
Yeah,
Fucking crazy if true. Like, that's bold.
yeah. Insane. Insane.
Yeah, quite the
But yeah,
series of events. So
quite a series of events. Yeah, I mean, this until we know for sure, we don't really know much. If you can find anything in the demo, if you want to watch it, I would be really
yeah, I've got it
interested to
downloaded.
know.
I've got a busy day today with the whole Euro final thing, but
Yep,
having a bit of a party.
looking forward to that.
But no, I'll take a look because I'm curious to see what the hell they're looking at. Because I remember the last time we had this sort of conversation around cons, you know, and his radar hack accusations, and looking in the demos, finding some sus as hell shit, but at the same time, not finding anything conclusive enough for my liking to say he's actually
Yeah,
definitely cheating. I mean, he played like sure some stupid stuff and like made some pushes and then some crazy 180s, but I'm like, it's not enough to call a player a definite like radar hacker. So I'll be curious to see
yeah,
what's actually lying about here. Maybe if there's
yeah,
actually one player AFK in spawn, then they 5-stack at the right bomb site. Yeah, fucking ban them. That's pretty obvious. But otherwise,
yeah.
I'm a bit
There's no, yeah,
wary.
there was no comment from the Croatian Federation or the International Esports Federation. Yeah,
Yeah, it is what it is. We'll see what we
it's.
can find.
I do encourage everybody to check out Maki's and Sego's Twitter, maybe Roga as well, because if you go to the replies page, it's all just like they don't really. It's not like they posted anything like this is a great injustice. We are obviously innocent. We will be proven right in time, and we were unrightfully banned. It's more like people go like, "Oh, of course." Yeah, more the Israeli players go like, "Yep, Croatia was obviously banned for obviously cheating in our game, and we didn't get the bracket reverted." SMH, IESF, and they just go in the comments like, "Enjoy watching from home, dickheads!" Like, like yeah, it's like, fuck yeah. I have no idea. But they are controversial characters. Like I said, not even the first time this year they are involved in the cheating accusation or even cheating ban. Let's see if IESF make any official comment on this. I would probably wager they don't, considering they haven't yet. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting.
Okay, yeah, I just opened up Roga's replies, and there's a certain Apex retweet that just. What the fuck, dude? But let's move on to the Eternal Shuffle. It's been a few things. It's nothing too massive, unlike last week. But some interesting moves. We'll start with Big cutting Process and signing Rigon, which is not really where I expected to see Rigon go. I wasn't sure where he'd end up. I did have a suspicion he might be like another player for ITB back when they first made the announcements. But instead, he's ended up here on Big, replacing Process, who I think is still a tiny little player, but it's just not quite filled out his potential, you know? Like, I can see the like prime athlete in him, just he's not developing. Like, he's not fucking getting there. And I'm like, it's a bit of a shame. I still think he has some value to add to a team, but Rigon, obviously, insane. Like, aimer, been a great playmaker whilst in Big Eagles, Guild Eagles, back when they were actually good. He was really one of the key pieces. So maybe this can be like a revitalization, because that roster really ran its course and then spent a year under the Guild Eagles banner, making extra money. So hopefully with Big, he can find some form again. They can maybe step up their game. I still think they're hamstrung by certain pieces on the roster, but maybe this will be a maybe this will work out for him. I'm still rooting for him. He's a talented guy.
Yeah, it's a good move. Rhaegon, being Swiss, speaks German, a very weird dialect of German, which honestly, he's probably not just waltzing into this team speaking German right at the bat, because I know that like some stuff between Swiss German and well Northern German can actually be quite different. One of the main things I know about, I think this is true about Swiss German, is that they don't do the R, like the R in the back of the throats. They do a trilling R, like R, which is really weird to hear when you're speaking German. But yeah, he speaks German. He's on this team, and it's a good signing. It's a shame for Process. I think Process is a good player. I think he did a good job on Big as well. I don't think he should have done much better. But it is a bit of a shame for him. He's probably gonna, I think he's going to land on his feet. I think he's a good enough player where he's going to find somewhere. I know he's also on a 5-year contract with Big, which might make that difficult, but I'm hoping that they're going to be gracious enough to sell him cheaply. But yeah, I do hope he lands on his feet somewhere. As for Rigon, good player who's going to do well. I think Big need maybe one more change to be a properly dangerous team. There is one piece in particular who is quite weak at the moment. His name ends in a capital N, and it's not Tabson. So, uh, I think, I don't know. Talking about Big is a bit like meh, because every single roster move they make seems to be an upgrade, but then it doesn't work out. So, I am starting to question Tabson's ability to do anything when he effectively has all the control in this big team and still doesn't do much. Like he has enough control in this team where I would assume that he has the exact team that he wants to at any given time, and still they don't really do much. But I don't know. Big, they're always dangerous as well. Like Big is a team that you can never really count out. In my opinion, I think often play good events. They often play good games. Maybe not good events, but they often play good games. They often play close games. But they then also go and lose to Permita in a CCT game. So it's like, it's so up and down. But yeah, Rigon might change that. Now they have proper star power in this roster, because before you had Crimbo pulling the entire team on his own. Then you had JDC, who was actually quite a bit of a revelation. He's played very good on Big, getting a bit better positions than he was having on some other previous teams. And now you have Rigon, who is probably going to do a better job than Process. So you've gone from 1 star to 3 stars. Now you just need to activate your upper, or get a better one. And
Yes.
yeah,
Get a better one.
yeah,
Probably the only way.
yeah, probably the only way.
Yeah, that's the big move. Liquid, we already talked. Did we talk about the ultimate part? I feel the ultimate part was really rumored, but realistically, what's new here is JKS and Mytha have been added. Ultimate's confirmed now, but yeah, Liquid is now JKS, Ultimate, NAF, Twists, and Yakindar. An interesting roster. I think some moves that not everyone's a fan of. Personally, I don't hate the Mytha move as much as many other people do, because I just, in the coaching market, you're trying to build with a fresher IGL, like it's always gonna be a massive risk and a difficult like move to justify, no matter who you're signing. So I don't really hate the Mytha move. The JKS one is, I think, a slam dunk.
Who would hate the Myther move? Who is better? Who's available?
That's not the point. People have critiqued the Mytha move on purely the basis of who is Mytha, what has he done, who is better, who's more available. Like, is not the point that people have been trying to make. It's realistically that just they don't see. I mean, what Mytha has done.
The guy who stood behind Apex in their top 4 run and their 2 finals at Challenger level lands, that guy is who Myther is. So it's like, yeah, nobody better is available. I rate the Myther move.
Yeah, I didn't hate it initially. Like, I was like, I've seen Myther like lead a variety of teams. Some of them to like he led Mouse to a title technically at Flashpoint, coached them. But he coached Trick. Yeah, he coached Apex Rebels and Apex. Like, that's where I know him from initially, is the academy days. I think he's been a decent enough coach who's gotten a pretty good results out of a variety of teams. So it's a good risk to take. So I think, as I said, any move they make in the coaching spot will probably be a risk, given they're on a fresh IGL and stuff.
Correction, he wasn't there for Paris. That was Kuban. I forgot about that. But he was there for the 2 finals they played in Atlanta and Espoo.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, that wasn't even really a big part of it for me. But importantly, no, he still did have success with Apex. I think this roster looks a bit odd. I still don't entirely get the Twist IGL, how that's going to work. The risk on Ultimate's a big one. But ultimately, they have not many choices, and they want to maintain certain like parts of their status, like, NA team in the NA RMR. Even though they're now no longer a majority NA, they're enough NA to still do it. So I don't know. some people I've seen this referred to as the worst Liquid roster in years. Honestly, I think this is better than the Rainwaker Patsy experiment, just because of how misused both Rainwaker and Patsy were. And the fact that this team, aside from their AWPer, which we've seen historically isn't the most important role for the comms, speaks English. Like, this is pretty much just an English-speaking roster with, Yekindar's English near perfect. I'm not sure how good Ultimates it is, but even if it is a bit questionable, the AWPer's not really the biggest deal in this sense. It's far more important that the caller, the secondary callers, like guys who actually need to have influence on the round, are able to communicate their ideas clearly to everyone else. And the AWPer just muddles through and hits shots. If I had to be optimistic. If I chose to be negative about this, I could. But I'm going to be fairly optimistic. I think it's a shame that we have to take Twists onto the IGL after he's been on career form, pretty much. That's going to be the biggest downgrade. Hopefully upgrading key positions and allowing Naf and Yakindar to a bit of time to get back into things, especially for Yakindar, I think will probably be positive. So I don't think it's the worst roster they've had in years and years. I just think they have to take some risks, and I think in guys like Mythar, they've taken the right ones.
Yeah. Wow, I completely forgot the Patsy Rainwaker team was last year. It feels like ages ago.
Yeah.
But that was also just because Liquid didn't play anything after they dropped Rainwaker. They played one showdown with Daps standing in. So that was ages ago. For almost a year they didn't play. Almost half a year they didn't play anything until they got the Cadian roster. JKS was a no-brainer signing. I think he's one of the better players you could have for that anchor spot, and he's also the only player you could really get while keeping yourself in the Americas armor. But it is a I don't know about the ultimate signing. If he works well. Like, it's a big if. It is a big if. He might be tier 1 ready. I saw Pasha said something about like, oh, back when Ultimate played for Honoris 3 years ago, he actually, and Liquid replaced Smuya. He actually contacted them to like basically try to sell Ultimate to Fnatic. So maybe some people have seen some stuff from Ultimate, which like,
I'm gonna be honest,
makes him
at that point he was not that good a player.
That
is the most ridiculous oversell. I read the same thing you did. That's the most ridiculous oversell I've ever heard.
Pasha is kind of gloating in that email at the moment. He posted it on Twitter and he was like, oh, it's a shame Fnatic didn't reply. Like, I tried to help you guys. And then it's like, he hasn't even played a map yet. And when he does, he might not work. And then Pasha is going to look really fucking stupid. So,
no, but it's an
maybe
idiotic idea. 3 years ago, 17-year-old Ultimate on Fnatic. Shut the fuck up. It's so dumb. He wasn't even that good in tier 2 after that. Like, shut up.
Yeah. Point being, maybe he saw something like about his character, which fits a tier 1 team that other players on that team weren't really showing. So
sick. He's still 17. Like,
yeah, it is still weird as fuck. But yeah, it is. We'll have to see about this fucking team. Like, people are saying Twist is IGL. That was a rumor which has been repeated several times from several different places. Probably that is the case. From the outside looking in,
interviewed and said he's not going to be him. So I'm pretty sure the official stance is going to be Twist IGL rather than like something random.
I heard somebody say that the HLTV short news feed had a headline saying JKS was IGL, but then they removed it, and I don't know if that is true.
I didn't see it if that did happen.
I didn't see it. I think maybe it was a typo in that case. But if that is true, that's even crazier. Either way, we're probably going to have a first-time IGL on this team. Because if Jakindar isn't doing it, then it is going to be a first-time IGL. It's a roster I'd like to... I like seeing the roster, I think. I think I do still like... I think it's a pretty cool team. But JKS was a no-brainer, so we talked about this for weeks. I talked about it so many times that JKS is pretty much the only signing you could have made here. Mythar is a good signing. Ultimate, it hinges on if he works. It's trial by fire.
Right.
So yeah, if it works, it's gonna work great. Otherwise, meh. In general, it feels milk toast. Like to me, this is like meh. It's another meh liquid roster. It's not going to be a roster which is going to win events. Um,
Right. Speaking of man milk
maybe it's a
toast,
starting.
let's
But yeah. Anyway.
let's move.
Oh yeah.
Because there's still more signings that are progressively less important. Kind of. One win have signed Hobbit to replace Gio. Gio. I don't know what it's actually supposed to be pronounced as. But
Joe Biden.
now the one win roster's now something a bit odd to look at. It's Hobbit, Neil, and Buster forming a Kazakhstani core with Ryujin and Latik. I don't really think much of this team. I think this is just Hobbit on the decline, looking for a new place to go to, extract some value from the latter stages of his career. I've tried to I've done demo review of Ryujin on a previous episode of Prospects Multi, I think. Doesn't really impress me too much, and I don't think the rest of this roster's that talented. So I think maybe Latik, who's had good moments on teams. So it's going to be a very middling roster that is going to aim for major RMRs, but I don't think has the legs to make it there.
He's an upgrade over Gio. Gio played a good game, but he is. I mean, he's probably going to be an upgrade over Gio.
You'd hope.
Latik's played a great game. What?
You'd hope he's an upgrade over Gio, but
yeah. Buster's managed to use his tier 1 experience to get good numbers here. Ryujin hasn't done much. Hobbit probably should be able to use his tier 1 experience to get good numbers here as well. It's not the first time he steps back into a lower tier team after being at the top. Because post the first Gambits in the where he also went to Hellraisers, but then he was with Windstrike for quite a while. And there he actually put up a pretty good performance, which eventually landed him on Gambit Youngsters, which turned into Gambit. This is the guy who has climbed up from tier 2 with the team before. And I'm not going to say this one-win team is untalented. I think a lot of the players here are good, and it's a team that I could see moving up into tier 1. But it's also something that could just be a tier 2 mainstay. We're just going to have to see, pretty much. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be something I probably follow just on the side in the periphery. The next move to talk about is the C9 roster officially confirmed. Now, we've all been essentially on board with what the majority of the roster is going to be. It's ended up looking a little different. So it's IC, Heavy God, Inters, the big shock, I think, for most people. Boomich and Axile. The discussions of roles immediately comes up in most people's minds in terms of who's going to be more aggressive, who's going to rotate. But as I think a lot of people have kind of concluded, myself too, that's a better problem to have than who's going to anchor. I think who's going to do the more favourable spots and get to be flashed into stuff and take the nice fights. I'd say that's a far easier role to find volunteers for than the opposite way around. So the Cloud9 roster has some talented pieces. I just know this team's going to be good in an uncanny way. They're just going to have a knack for winning BO3s and making it to playoffs. They're not going to be that dangerous of a team once they're there. But with a guy like Heavy God, who's mega skilled, really good, I think, honestly, a guy who should have had a lot more interest from teams in this offseason. He should have been at the forefront of a lot of discussions. With a guy like him, Axel, who can have moments, and IC, who's a decent AWPer, I think is getting a bit overrated, but decent AWPer. They have the talent. And with the combination of the experience and the calling and the supportive elements, I think they'll be able to still be an uncanny team, who have a knack for going places, rather than really any real threat. So not too big of an upgrade. I think it's just good that they've managed to get some dead weight off and bring in some fresh players, and finally a real AWPer.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I don't know. It's obviously a downgrade over Electronic and Perfecto in terms of name, value, and Shiro. Inters, I'm not it felt like Heavy God is probably going to be moving into better spots after this, which is good. I think. But he has always played those anchor positions, and Inter's coming in would suggest that Heavygod is going to play better positions, which is, I wonder what that could do for him. I see it's probably going to be solid enough. Inter's, I think he can handle those anchor positions. I think he's done it well in the past. I don't think he really played bad enough to warrant being replaced by Buster. I think he's good enough to hang at this level. It's going to hinge a lot on if Axel can find his form, because he did not really look too comfortable on the last roster. Let's see what happens there. But it is a bit of a shame Inters comes in there, because I think if Heavygod takes the Inters positions and some of the other players that were rumored, like I think we said this last week or the week before that, you could pick pretty much anyone out of the mid-tier Russian riflers. You could take a Resalt, you could take a Forester, you could take a Kenzie, you could take pretty much whoever and probably fit them into this team in a good enough way. And instead they've gone with Inters, and Heavygod is going to be that sort of star rifle probably. So, which is honestly, in my opinion, a little bit disappointing. But yeah, Cloud9 are back. They have a roster which I think looks better than Liquid's. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they valued experience over talent in the Inter signing, and I think that might work in their favor if they can get as much out of Heavygod and Axel as we hope they would. I mean, not even Axel having to return to his prime form; he just has to be a good rifler again. And I think this roster's pretty good, pretty solid. We'll see how it goes. Always interesting to follow, but we won't be able to see them really until Blast, I think, at the latter stage of the month. So a bit of a wait on that. And finally, ITB confirmed their final player to be Boros. One of my favourite prospects in terms of raw talent, one of the great disappointments in terms of like character flaws and his time on Falcons. I do like a flawed hero, though. I don't like these cookie-cutter good guys. Superman never was my favourite, never will be, and Boros really isn't a Superman, but he is incredibly skilled, deadly. When he gets his spots, he'll find impact after impact. I just think, yeah, this ITB roster just looks way too puggy, my liking. I think it's going to be a bit of a mess. But ultimately, they do have a lot of talent. I think between Boros and Juan Flatcher, they have two of the most skilled riflers you can go and dig out in Tier 2. Like, they've definitely nailed their star rifle signings. Synopsy as a caller and as a fragger has always been really good. And in terms of a caller as well, I think slightly underrated. In terms of what he's able to make work in teams, that's like a puggier style. I'm not too big a fan of Smear and Kios, but it's overall a roster that's poses a threat if you let the game get too open and too scrappy.
Yeah, it does fit. Boris is probably the most exciting player you could have put as the fifth after we got to know the previous four players. It is hinging. This team is hinging on so many things, but definitely for a puggy team, this could be really good. I think Boris fits that as well. I think Boris probably fits better under someone like Synopsy, who has a tactical playbook which is shallower than a puddle, but is really good in terms of leading a sort of puggy team to results, like it did with B&E. Vibes, basically. And I think that fits Boris pretty much perfectly. So it could be Redemption Day for him. ITB, who have obviously been out of the game for like half a year at this point, because they played the Armor and then started pulling the roster apart, and now they've rebuilt around Smuja. Yeah. It's like the best version of an international Bad News Eagles, if I'm gonna be completely honest. Because I think you've upgraded GXX, you've upgraded maybe side graded Rigon. And then I mean, look, as much as you can dislike Kios, he's probably better than Seneri. So it is a vibes team. It's an FPL vibes team in its most classic sense. Looking forward to see it play. Hope it is Redemption Day for Boris, because I still like Boris as a player quite a lot.
Yeah, that'd be cool. All right, let's get on to Prospects of the Week. There actually has been some Counter-Strike this week, so we actually can do this segment. there's been enough Counter-Strike is rather what I should say. And a couple interesting players. We've both picked Danes. I'm going to kick it off with Xiphon. He has been literally a prospect on this show. He was part of a double feature with Yabi back when they were in Copenhagen Flames. Obviously, their careers have gone very different directions since then. But I think Xiphon, back then, the scouting report was essentially mega stable with his aim, solid anchor. And if you want to get the most out of him on like T-sides or just in a more playmaking sense, you just got to walk him into fights where he can just out-aim people. He's going to have the crosshair placement. He's going to have the reaction time. He's going to land those really precise one-taps at distance. So that was always my my read on him. He did lack a bit of instinct for going and making the extra play that Yabi had. Like, Yabi was the rotator. Yabi was the guy who would take the bigger risks, and I think it was slightly stronger in terms of like massive flicks and adjustments, which kind of just fit the playstyles. So that's why the two of them were a really lethal duo on that Flames team. And honestly, the way HooXi used them is part of what sold me on him deserving a bit of a move. HooXi did have a good understanding of how to use those two guys. And I think Xiphon's kind of struggled since then because he's been on a lot of teams where he hasn't seemed comfortable. On Sprout, I know he had a really good start to that run, like for a good time, and it was him. I want to say Spook were the two like big fraggers on that team. And Xiphon was able to be as he was before, like more stable, more passive, slow working, anchoring, and he was able to be really impactful. But just a run of weird teams he played on didn't really look that good. Finally, on this TSM, back to full Danish. He looks comfortable. Valda's got the right mix of players for him to feel comfortable calling around as well. And they had some success almost immediately. So I thought it'd be a great time to just bring up Xiphon again, just so no one forgets. The kid still has a lot of skill, and in the right team can find a lot of success. So there you go. That's my Xiphon pick. You've taken his teammate.
Yes. Talking about Xiphon, he's still also sort of in the Plopsky territory where he's a very young player, but who already has a lot of experience, which is definitely good for his career. But I have taken his teammate, and this is sort of a callback to the last week where we said Altix might even be the better option for this team over Config, who was the one they actually wanted to begin with. But they went with Altix, and Altix might be an even better signing, and he's sort of shown that this week. He was 127 at the SkinClub thing. Yeah, great. I mean, as much as I want to talk about Spook, I feel like I talk about Spook is my prospect of the week every single week. Because he's always at the top of the stat sheet, and he's always doing great. Even in this event, he was he was better than everyone else at this event. He was better than both Altix and Xiphon, even if he didn't even make the final. But yeah, Altix, also a great player. I think he showed a lot of great stuff in his past teams, both in the Astralis main team and in the Academy team, especially on Parisi, once he moved there. And he's showing it again on TSM, at least with this one event which they've had right now. He's played 127. Like, it doesn't get much better than that, if you're a player in Altix's position. He's actually taking quite a different T-side stance than I thought he would take, because I would have pinned him for like the aggressive T-side rifler. But he's actually the hard ass lurker, and Xiphon is the one taking the most opening duels. So good job on both of them, but good job on Altix. Yeah, good. Also a good young player with quite a bit of experience as well. So yeah.
He's bounced around a
TSM
lot,
is looking dangerous. Yeah.
No, yeah.
Yes, and he's played with a lot of great players. Because when he played with let's see, let me just go back to when he was on Astralis Talent, he played with players such as just other Academy players. Let's not talk too much about that. Paddy is probably one of the big ones. But when he was on the main team, that was when he played with people like Blame F, with Device, with Glaive. And I think he also would have played with Zipnix on Astralis Talent. And then, of course, with Prezi, he played with like the big names, or the bigger tier 2 names, Roy, Refresh, TMB, Nikoros, Dupree. Yeah. And now he's found a team with some more bigger Danish names, and he's seemingly doing doing a good job. I'm looking forward to watching him in the next couple of games.
Yeah, interesting how the roles have shaked out on this roster.
Yeah, because I'm right. Like, I am correct, right? That Baltics played more aggressive T-side, right?
Historically, they are essentially the opposite way around. Not so much in Flames, because in Flames they did despite having Roy, you would see Xiphon like contact a lot of stuff, like slow walks in, and it'd result in opening frags. But he wasn't really that aggressive a brawler. But in this roster, they seem to have found a different balance. So that's cool. I guess it shows like maybe for future teams or when this team needs to make changes or upgrades, both these guys are a bit malleable. They can fit into spots we didn't expect them to be in. I did think they would be more opposite.
He was one of the bigger openers as well on Astralis, but that might just have been because he was a new guy, and the new guy gets the bitch entry spots. But yeah.
So yeah,
I expected it to be the other way around, but it's cool that they're changing things up.
100%, and we'll be following this team, obviously. TSM and Tier 2 fight and Tier 2 play. They're going to be one of the bigger names who get to play more events, so I can't wait to see what they do. But all right, that wraps up the show. If you made it this far, you're my hero. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Goodbye.